Hello folks, I hope you're all doing very well. We're flying over New York in the Just Flight Tomahawk as part of my world tour, and I think now is a good time to revisit some of those vital VR settings, tips, tricks, and just general advice if you're struggling with performance with this sim. Now today I am actually running my 13900K 4090 system with the Dream Air. I haven't used it for a while, but it's absolutely rocking, I must say. And yeah, do stick around, stay tuned, because I think some of these things will be very helpful to you. Look at this here, wow. So the first thing I actually want to talk about is a free application, and it's by a very good friend of mine, Uwe. If you're watching this, buddy, I'm going to give you a massive wave here as I'm flying over New York. In his spare time, he's written a very clever application, but it's also been updated, and other people have got involved as well, to the point where it really is a very useful utility that's completely, like I say, free of charge. And what it does is, essentially, it gives you a host of options to really improve the performance, the frame timing of your flight sim. Now, this doesn't actually relate only to MSFS 2024, it's also for DCS World, X-Plane 12 as well. And basically it gets rid of all your bloatware, all of the things that are running sort of in the background on your taskbar that are just causing your frame timing to suffer. And that's something that's really important to understand about VR. It's not just about the raw frame rates, you know, the actual, if you're getting 60 frames per second, great, but it's how consistent those frames are. And a lot of that is down to the health of your computer and all of the crap that you've got running in the background. This takes away all of the pain because you can configure it the way you want to. Very, very clever. Not only that, it also has power plan mode for NVIDIA based GPUs and sort of a workflow system. I haven't tried this myself, but basically you can kind of configure it so that when you click your flight sim to run, it will basically close everything and get the PC configured the way you want every single time. Now, this application is called VR Auto Optimizer. Please do check it out. It's very clever. And as I say, Uwe is the main man behind this. It has changed a bit over this past months, and a guy called Mac Brown Dog has also got involved, and it's just getting better and better all the time. And whatever system you're running, it absolutely makes a big difference. Like I say, not just the performance, overall performance, but the frame timing. I'll have a link to where you can find that free of charge in the notes below. So that's the first thing of many things we're going to talk about today, giving you some tips and tricks about getting those VR settings dialed in. In the past, I've done very specific settings, and I probably still will do that, but I'm finding that more and more difficult because PC systems, they're all different, and what works for me might not work for you. So I think this is probably a better way of doing it, is to give you some pointers, some really good advice, so that you can go away and try it yourself. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is probably an obvious one, but you really do need to consider it, and I find it quite strange how it's not really talked about enough, and that is simply the resolution of your VR headset. Because in VR, you're not just rendering one image, you're rendering two high-resolution displays, and that resolution has to account for barrel distortion correction, you know, run times, whether it's OpenXR or Steam VR, which really does make a huge difference to the performance of your computer. Unless you've got a 5090, you know, or 4090, but even then, it's a struggle. There has to be some compromises made. Now, thankfully, we do have native DLSS 4.5 support. I recommend, if you're using a 40 series card, like I am today, to use preset K. But if you're running a 50 series card, then have a play around with preset L or M on performance mode, because that will actually help your ghosting. That's when the numbers kind of get blurry on glass cockpits. But I must admit, I do prefer preset K even with my 50 series card, because it's just that bit crispier. Now, a common mistake that is made is using different runtimes. If you've got a Pimax headset, for example, I really would recommend using either OpenXR, which is the Pimax OpenXR, or if you want to use Steam VR, then use the SBoy 3 driver, especially if you're after decent motion reprojection. That's basically frame generation for VR. With that, you will absolutely enjoy a very smooth frame rate, but you have to make sure that you can actually hit that frame rate to begin with. And something like this, where flying over a very densely packed photogrammetry area like New York with, you know, reflections in the water and all that kind of thing, is a very good test. If you can get around 30-35 frames per second here, then you're pretty much good to go anywhere in the FS world. Now, of course, I am running a general aviation aircraft today. If you are an airliner guy, which I'm not so much, then make sure you fly one of your payware add-ons, you know, over New York. And if you can hit, or try and hit, around 35 to 30 frames per second, if you can do it here, you'll be able to do it anywhere in the world, because this is a worst case environment. I always say that stress test environments like New York or London City, they're the PC breaker zones. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. Also, as I say, play around with DLSS. I prefer TAA mode, but I can't always run it. Today I'm running DLSS because I'm running steam gauges and I'm looking outside of the cockpit. And actually, in this day and age, DLSS can actually look better than TAA mode as well. So my advice to you is, if you're flying IFR or you want to focus on instruments, then turn the settings down and run in TAA mode. But if you're doing this kind of thing, which often for me I'm sightseeing and stuff like that, you know, and enjoying VFR flying, then to be fair, DLSS is the answer. It is definitely something to use, and it's in the game now, in the sim rather. Use it, it's very useful. So a couple of things about actual settings in the sim. Terrain level of detail and object level of detail are CPU main thread killers. Be careful with them, because the trouble is with VR is you're moving your head around a lot more than in a sort of flat screen environment. So people tend to push the LOD up to a point where your main thread suffers. Please be careful with this slider. I would recommend about 150 to 180, unless you've got a very powerful CPU like a 9800X3D processor, or perhaps an Intel based CPU like a 1400K or whatever. Today, as you can see here, it's looking very nice. I'm getting 45 frames per second on the dot with recording as well, and that's in DLSS mode, and I'm running my LOD at 230. And I think you'll agree, it looks absolutely stunning. But bear in mind, LOD is a big killer for the CPU main thread. Another thing as well is about frame pacing, very important, and I would recommend, where possible, to lock your FPS to half of your refresh rate. Good thing about something like the Dream Air is you can run it at 72 Hz if you want to. I'm actually running it at 90 Hz today, but 72 Hz is fine, and that will give you much better headroom. But locking your frame rate down is a very good idea. It's all very well showing off you can get 70 frames per second in VR, but in practice, locking it down to say something like 45 frames per second gives your PC more headroom to do other tasks, such as the flight model and weather. Talking of the weather, clouds is a massive hit on performance, guys. I just can't say this enough. I personally feel weather isn't really that well optimized still in the sim, and generally speaking, I really would not recommend running any more than high with your clouds. Even medium really, but the trouble is the difference between medium and high is quite significant in terms of the visual eye candy. And unless you're running something like a 5090 where you can absolutely max those settings, I would really recommend that you stick to medium or high with your clouds. Now, another thing I want to mention is just payware scenery and handcrafted airports, all the stuff that we love to buy, but the trouble is it can clog up your community folder, which means that it'll take ages to load and can cause conflict as well. So maybe just be a little bit more careful about what you have in your community folder. I know there are applications out there that can manage that for you as well, but it's incredible the difference between certain payware aircraft, especially the airliners. So I would say that maybe every sort of few weeks or so, think about the kind of experiences you're using the flight sim with, and you could just uninstall some add-ons temporarily whilst you're doing certain, flying activities, because otherwise you just got tons and tons of crap, tons of bloatware essentially in your community folder that's not doing, well, you, the VR headset or the experience any good at all. So get rid of it if you're not using it. It's kind of like we're in a good situation right now where there's so many amazing add-ons, but the trouble is they're coming thick and fast, and before you know it, you've got 20-30 aircraft, the same or even more, add-on sceneries and things. It just gets a bit crazy. So try and just give yourself a head start and your PC by streamlining what you're using at any given time. Now, other things in the sim itself, simple things that you can turn down, are things like shadows, which is quite a shocker in my opinion, but shadows are still very poorly optimized, as is reflections and contact shadows in VR. Just remove them because they are performance killers, and often they kind of look crap anyway, and they might produce really weird artifacts. Things like ray marks reflections is better optimized in the sim now, as is ambient occlusion, but only enable them if you've got a really decent GPU. And if you've got them disabled, don't worry about it, you're not really missing out too much, because I've always said this, but the sim nowadays is so scalable that even on very low settings, it still looks really good and way better than, say, even high settings with a monitor, because you are inside the aircraft, you are inside the scenery, you are basically part of the virtual reality environment. It's just amazing, and it will always beat flat screen, even on low settings, in my opinion. Another one is light shaft. It's a very nice effect, but it does hurt your performance. So another one to think about is traffic. Traffic is a #1 killer, and often you don't even appreciate it. I would not recommend using offline mode because it actually does hurt performance significantly. Just be careful what you do, especially when it comes to road traffic, ships, airport ground vehicles. These are all things that are CPU killers, okay? And it's also often the culprit for those really annoying spikes and frame timing issues. So honestly, I would even just get rid of them altogether. It's not really going to affect you too much. And even with my 5090 PC, I do have them either on medium or even low, because they just get in the way. After all, this is the flight sim, not walking simulator. Oh, look at this, absolutely fantastic. This is beautiful. Quite surprised actually by my 3900K here. It's really running very well. At times we're down to about 30 frames per second, then we kind of shoot back up to 45 again, which is very impressive for this area. Now another one is dynamic foveated rendering. Obvious, I know, but it can be overlooked. It is running very well now in MSFS. You don't need to use quad views in Pimax Play. Just make sure that's disabled and just use eye tracking, and foveated rendering will just work out of the box. I personally recommend between 35 and 40. You can go lower than that. Some people even super sample the main display and then get it down even lower, like something crazy like 20 or something, but in my opinion it does get a bit distracting. So I tend to run it around 35-40. Now I know that a lot of headsets don't have eye tracking. That's still fine, because with fixed foveated rendering you're still going to get between 10 and 15 frames per second back, easily in some cases even more, using DFR. So definitely use it. It's a tool that Asobo has given us. Thank you, Asobo, if you're watching this. I know you're not, but in any case, we really do appreciate it. Use DFR. It's definitely your friend. Especially now with Sim Update 6, there's less jittering when using it as well. There is a few issues though I've noticed with the cloud suddenly kind of stuttering and moving as you move your eyes. That's still an issue that needs fixing, but we can't have it all. Overall, I think it's a very, very cool feature that I'm so glad that we finally have it in MSFS. So a bit of a recap here. Render resolution, very important. I would definitely urge you not to run native on most VR headsets. I think 70 to 80% of the render resolution can give you a massive performance back without hurting the visual clarity that you can see here too much. And in most cases, depending on the flying you're doing, run DLSS 4.5 or TAA mode if you really need that clarity with glass cockpits. But it's got to a point now, in my opinion, where you could just run DLSS all the time, or FSR as well, and actually it will look pretty damn good. Terrain level of detail and LOD is a CPU main thread killer. Make sure that, well, it's at least down to around 150 to 180, unless you've got a very powerful computer such as a X3D processor or 13900K base CPU. Things like, of course, large airports, dense cities, payware, it's all kind of obvious stuff, folks, but just make sure that your community folder isn't overflowing with add-ons that could cause conflicts, frame timing spikes, all the rest of it. I'd also recommend cleaning out your NVIDIA cache quite regularly as well. That's a very important thing. Same for the AMD GPU users, although I don't know how you do it, but with the NVIDIA app you can do it very easily. So many things. Also, of course, the DLSS swapper. Make sure that you are using the latest DLSS file. I'll show you now how to do it on the screen. I've shown it loads of times. Very, very easy these days. You just basically download the latest file, swap it out, and that's it. And of course, you can change the preset. I would recommend preset K for most of you out there, unless you don't like ghosting. It's still going to be there, don't get me wrong, but preset L or M is definitely recommended for 50 series cards. And things like I've mentioned, shadow maps, cockpit shadows, ambient occlusion, reflections, light shafts, post-processing effects, those real-time processes can really hamper performance. Get rid of them as well and lock your frame rate down in a worst case area like New York or London City. And don't forget, it's not all about your graphics card. It's your CPU doing all the work when it comes to the terrain and object level of detail, traffic, even complex aircraft avionics and systems, large airports, dense scenery and photogrammetry. All of that is your main thread. So look after it, folks. Please look after it. And at the end of the day, the VR is all about consistency. It's not all about those high FPS numbers. Like right now, I am down to 43, 44 frames per second here, and it feels butter smooth. It really, really does. It feels fantastic. Running the Dream Air at 70% resolution. It looks fantastic, and I can run it on the 4090 or even a 4070 Ti. The Dream Air, well, it will run that all day long, no problems at all, as long as you're careful with your settings. Of course, you can't run it at native image quality. For that, you do need a 5080, 5090, you just do. But my point is, you don't need a 5090 to enjoy the Dream Air, for example. Now, in terms of Pimax Play or Pimax Evo, you have other tools as well, such as cropping your field of view. That's a very useful tool, and it gives you quite a bit of performance back, up to around 20%, as well as like I say, the S-Boy 3 driver, which will sort of give you really nice motion projection, as well as just narrow that field of view down a bit so the rendering target is a little bit lower, which does give you better performance. I think that will do for now. Get your head around all that. If you like these kind of videos, please let me know and I'll do more of them. It is quite a balancing act when it comes to getting that perfect VR performance, and I can't give you that on this channel. No one can, okay? All the YouTubers out there that are doing this, and there's some fantastic YouTubers out there, by the way, that are trying to help you with VR performance, but they can't do it for you. You have to kind of understand the process and sort of tinker around and get the best sort of compromise for your system. And by the way, while I'm talking about really good YouTubers, I want to give a massive shout out to, let me just get the correct name here, Virtue Sim. This guy, I really like the way he does his videos, and he's got some really good advice. So if you haven't already, please do check his channel out in the notes below, because he's one of the good ones and I highly recommend his channel. Right, folks, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little bimble around New York. It looks absolutely stunning in Sim Update 6 Beta, I must say. I do know I've missed a ton of things in this video, but this is just a few tips and tricks to get you on your way. And as I say, I'll do more of them if you're interested. But for now, I think that will do. And I'll see you again very soon. Take care, and bye for now.